On the first slide, my emblem's up top. The right side is the for-profit business. The left side is the non-profit business. My passion is to build knowledge capacities in organizations. That's what I'm good at. So anytime we start down the road, you always have a little map to show you where we're going. That's a simple concept called wayfinding. Wayfinding is knowing your way. As a young soldier, when I first was in the Army in '82, '83, I was in the jungles of Panama. As a young infantry soldier, you learn your skills rather quickly on how to navigate and know your way. Think of it in those terms when we talk about organizations and knowledge. People coming into organizations have the challenge of knowing their way. And if the organization doesn't know how to map or provide the tools for their personnel to operate in, then everyone is lost. And the old adage is there's no work like rework. Does anyone ever experience that? There's no work like rework. Oh my. Because that learning cycle has to start over again, it seems like, on a regular basis, because things fall off. People change out, people come in, everything has to be relearned again. Time becomes the enemy in the sustainment of knowledge. So these are all challenges that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about knowledge management. Now, before you saw this slide or heard my introduction, how many folks here knew what knowledge management was? Oh, heck, one. Yay! Two, three. All right, so we got a few. Developing the grant business. That's what we're at right now. That's where I am at right now. I'm taking the advantages of what I know and how to do it and applying it to grant development, grant writing, and grant evaluation. And then ultimately, it all serves to build the cultures. So, can I have some input, other than the three folks that raised their hand on what knowledge management was? Tell me what knowledge is. Anybody brave? Anybody want to chip in? Anybody? Anybody? Come on now.
Information, the ability to organize.
Okay, I'll go with that. Information and the ability to organize.
I'll tell you what it's not wisdom.
So you can't have wisdom without knowledge, or you...
We pray we do.
Wisdom is the ability to use knowledge. Okay. Anyone else want to chip in? It's not painful. There's no test. Though I did hand out a paper hurriedly about an hour and a half ago. That is your tool to take home, and we'll talk about that later. And at any point you have a question, throw something at me. I'm easily stopped. So for our understanding today, the definition is the fact or condition of knowing. Something with familiarity gained through experience or association. That is something that really resonates with understanding what knowledge is. And if you apply it to an HR or an organizational learning or bringing folks into the fold of a mission or a purpose, that is something that really should resonate with you on what you want from them. How many folks are small business owners? I got to say, in my aspect, coming from northwestern Pennsylvania, I was born and raised in a small business culture. My dad has always been independent. One rule at our house was if you ever had a business idea, go talk to Dad, because he would tell you the things to look out for. And if you ever wanted to get talked out of it, go talk to Mom, because she would tell you, you don't know anything about it, you can't do that, oh no, no, no. So in that setup, there was always the balance. Experience and association comes with time and exposure to whatever that knowledge is. And then that deduces or produces wisdom. So we take that definition, and I want to bring in what the Army uses. The thing that brought me to Southern Arizona was in 2004, I received a direct commission. I went to Fort Huachuca to report for Military Intelligence Officer Basic School. I became the oldest second lieutenant in the inventory. I turned 40 going through that school. I like this definition because it supports the mission. It supports decision making. And importantly enough, it talks right in the front, the art of creating. So in essence, most people think that knowledge management is an information technology solution. a technology rollout will fix the issues of communication and knowledge building. That's part of it. But you also have to have the people represented in that definition. You got to look at the culture and address that audience on how they communicate and how they should communicate. It's a simple process, as in most things in the world. It's a simple process, and we're talking about knowledge discovery, knowledge capture, sharing, and applying. Now, this is represented in a circle, but what I want to impress is that it's not a flat concept. It is a spiral or agile concept that changes over time. Things you learned 10 years ago may not apply today, but over time they morph into some other knowledge because you had that experience 10 years ago. So that's where the wisdom builds. So what we're talking about today is the capacity to build a knowledge framework, a knowledge set around the work of grant writing, grant evaluation, and grant development. Now let me divert a little bit. Grant development and what I'm speaking of is what I'm good at, which is finding things. As a military intelligence officer, my job was to represent the enemy in the TOC or in the command post. So I represented the enemy. My job was to know what they're doing, so I could advise the operations officer and the folks doing the work on our side on what not to do or what should to do or what to expect. In that sense, in a business operation, that's called business intelligence, knowing what's coming down the pike. So what I'm offering up in this service is in the center is the knowledge base. That's what I am going to build, a profile of the entities that are my clients. In exchange, I will build for them the capacities that I find out there, that business intelligence, in a shared system. On the outer edges are those opportunities that I'm going to utilize, in this case, a cloud service called SharePoint. Microsoft has just released in the last, I'd say 2 years, a cloud-based software system of SharePoint. How many folks have utilized the SharePoint or have that? Okay, so there's some familiarity. The term's been around for, I'm going to guess, 16 years or so. It's a platform. As all platforms have done over time, they've gotten much better. So instead of an organization being faced with the upfront base cost of spending $150,000 plus just to stand up a SharePoint, not even talking about the personnel to run it, they've actually offered up a pay-for-user service. And that's the solution today. I'm not a technology salesman. I'm using the technology that works best for the lowest cost. What am I trying to achieve, you ask? A sustainable resource. Knowledge can be a sustainable resource if handled correctly. Going back to the learning cycle of what did we do last year when we did this? Or Joe left last week and we don't know how to do this. All those self-shooting in the foot type activities can all be changed, but they require someone to lead the change. So the knowledge set would be built by the client profile. What that does is it gives me intelligence on what they're looking for. That's their continuity through me to build out and find strategically what funds they're planning to secure over the next year. Where are they going strategically? There's a component of educating and training. The shooting in your own foot concept is done in just about every organization I've ever been in because the momentum is usually short-lived around projects or mission. But when you look at an organization that's got a 100-year or 50-year lifespan, there's probably been trends where knowledge has been built, used, and lost on a regular basis. What we're talking of doing is activating that work culture to create a sustainable asset for the organization, an intellectual capital. So that requires building the culture around the behaviors that support a knowledge architecture and a knowledge base. Communications plan, these are the tools that help facilitate behavior to change to support that knowledge ecosystem or that intellectual capital. It's not by accident good organizations function. It requires some leadership, a lot of leadership, and it also requires a good workforce. The communications plan will give you the tool and the map and the strategy in order to execute that. Oh, let me go back. The last bullet there is web-based. What I propose is web-based, which means the knowledge is web-based. That does not mean email-based. That does not mean text-to-text based. That is wrapping up and putting importance about that knowledge set, that it doesn't have to be in somebody's inbox somewhere that no one else knows about. You're making the knowledge important to the organization, therefore shared inherently. So let's talk spokes of action. So if you think of a wheel, the wheel, the hub is supported by spokes, which transfers energy in a degree to the ground to make movement happen. Think of that concept. So the spokes, here again I'm citing right from the U.S. Army's FM on this subject. They talk about three main spokes that make knowledge management work. The people, how do you build that culture? In this day and age where job market is very competitive, I would think it'd be very easy to hire the people that would support this culture. Because if you're not going to have someone that's a player in the culture, then that's not a positive to your organization or its lifespan. So pick and choose. Build that culture. The next one is processes. Going back to the communications plan, knowing what is important to the organization. As a young soldier coming in 1982, as a young infantry soldier, we had a format for reporting called a salute report. That meant if you were out on a patrol somewhere and you saw the enemy, you had a quick, easy, recordable, reportable system that everybody knew how to do it because that was required. So not only to engage the enemy, but to report what you're seeing because that feeds the information system in the overall arching purpose. That requires a little training, that's all. You can build awareness in people and you can reinforce practices, but you got to have some processes that are across the board. Last spoke of action, the technology. Now, you have to think that I'm not selling technology, we're utilizing technology. It wasn't that long ago when a pencil was considered new technology. So we are looking at using SharePoint or whatever the tools are for that organization. In a consulting framework, I would go to the organization and see what they're using now. They already may have all the technology they already need, they just are not using it well. I'm not a salesman for technology, I'm a salesman for solutions. But they have to be solutions that fit the culture. In the idea of a sustainment process and a sustainable resource, forestry is one of those sustainable resources in our neck of the woods that doesn't require a lot of work. But it does require not building on it and wiping out the forest, you know, or turning it into a parking lot. But even if you cut it, it'll still come back. In 80 years, you got a forest again. It'll always be productive. When I look at building a client's knowledge set, I am looking at becoming the Johnny Appleseed of the knowledge ecosystem. I really want to make a difference in organizations at the ground level because awareness and change in behavior will translate into revenue. It will absolutely make innovation, retention, knowledge building, all those things much easier for any organization that's willing to go down that path. So that client base, here again the profile, that's a dynamic profile that's a shared resource. Meaning as a paid for service, pay for fee service, pay as you go service, you'll have your own site in this instance, and what I'm speaking of is a SharePoint site that you now will have resident knowledge building capabilities. You don't have to go out and build a whole new IT infrastructure. You don't have to do all that stuff. But what it does is it gives you an ability to archive, retrieve, do your own analysis, look over time, what did we do 5 years ago? All that is resident now in one place. It's not anyone's email, it's not in a shared drive, you don't know where that is, it got backed up somewhere. All those mystery things that happens with knowledge on occasion is now preventable, and it becomes a sustainable resource. All of this, going back to that forestry concept, requires a stewardship mentality. Early on in my infantry training, when you dug a foxhole, and you were always preparing the foxhole. Whenever you had a chance, you were making it better. Improving your position is what it's called. It's not because you're gonna live and breathe and just stay in that position. You're making it better for the next guy. Stewardship is basically improving your lot for the next person. It's a very selfless service mentality, but it's very effective. Because if you improve the conditions now, you just made it better for the next generation or the next Joe to be in the foxhole. That is something that I find that is critical to building that work culture. If you want them to understand awareness, then you have to show them what that is. I like this quote by Benjamin Franklin, if you can't read it in the back. An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And I can't say it any plainer than that, but it takes dedicated resources to make that come to fruition. Any questions of me? All right, I'll be around the rest of the day. I'm in Sierra Vista. I'm reachable and available. Thank you.